This is Niavaran Palace in North Tehran, former residence of Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, the Shah of Iran. It was from here that in January 1979, the Shah left to go into exile, never to return. 2 weeks later, Ayatollah Khomeini proclaimed an Islamic Republic and the end of 2,500 years of monarchy in Iran. Today, Niavaran is kept as a museum. In the Shah's dressing room hang uniforms heavy with ribbons and braid, the classic trappings of the Third World dictator. Frozen in time by the events of 1979, this is the Shah's enduring reputation. But the man who wore the uniforms would never accept this label. In his own eyes, he was a visionary king, leading a grateful nation towards something that he called the Great Civilization. History now tells us that he was wrong, but for nearly 40 years, many people gambled on him being right. This is the story of that gamble, and of why Mohammad Reza Pahlavi became the last Shah.
There is a very specific and special relationship between me and my people. As long as this special relationship exists between myself and my people, I don't see where somebody should or could step in and break it.
The Shah was a genuine visionary. He had a vision for his country. A fully developed country taking its place alongside its natural Aryan compatriots of Western Europe and the United States. He wasn't just a cynical dictator.
مردم ما شاه رو مثل یک شیطان میدونستن. حتی کار خوبش رو هم بر اساس شیطنت میافتن، نه بر اساس اینکه یک کار خوب داره میکنه.
The Shah became Shah because of his father, Reza Khan, the first Pahlavi Shah. Outside the White Palace in Tehran stands an unfinished statue of Reza Khan. Work on the statue was halted by the revolution, but the bronze legs remain as an unintended monument to a man who came from nowhere to found a dynasty. Reza Khan's rise to power coincided with his country's decline. By the 1900s, Iran, known to foreigners as Persia, had been carved up by the imperial superpowers of Russia and Great Britain. As his country fell apart, Reza Khan began his ascent to the throne. He joined the Iranian Cossack Brigade and rapidly rose through the ranks. After the First World War, he entered the political arena as a military strongman. In 1926, he ousted the ruling Qajar dynasty and crowned himself Reza Shah Pahlavi, King of Kings. At his side during the coronation was his 6-year-old son, Mohammad Reza, now crown prince and heir to the throne. Judge for yourself, he later wrote, how much fear and reverence all of that ceremony could inspire in a child of 6. Fear and reverence also sum up the feelings inspired in the son by his father.
Here was this frightened young boy who was always belittled by his father, and Reza Shah always said, my son can't carry on after me, he's not tough enough to do this, he's got to be a ruler like me if he wants to hold this country together. So the boy always felt inadequate in relationship to this giant of a figure.
Reza Shah was the very pragmatic, level-headed, disciplined, and strong man. His son, Mohammad Reza Shah, was a bit of a mystic, very sentimental, thin-skinned, and really very emotional. They were really very, very different personalities.
Reza Shah dominated his countrymen as well as his son. Believing Iran had become stuck in the Middle Ages, he applied the disciplines of the parade ground to bring it into the modern world. Taking his inspiration from the West, he built railways and roads and founded hospitals, schools and universities. At the same time, he dealt ruthlessly with enemies and rivals, making the Pahlavi name feared and hated throughout Iran. His most stubborn opponents were to be found among the Iranian clergy. Iran is a Muslim country, but like no other. Nearly all Iranians are Shiites, the minority sect in Islam. Shi'ism is the repository of the country's most traditional beliefs. It gives to the Iranian psyche Puritanism, a distrust of authority, and a reverence for martyrdom. But Reza Shah had no time for a religion that got in the way of modernization. In a frontal assault on tradition, Reza Shah outlawed the chador, or veil, worn by women, and for good measure he ordered that men shave their beards and adopt the Pahlavi cap.
کلاه پهلوی را با میخ میکوبن به سر مردم و خدمتتون عرض کنم که چادرها را از پیرزن‌هایی که اصلا نمیتونه بدون حجاب زندگی کنه اینا را از سرشون به زور برداشته میشه، سلب آزادی ها میشه و مشخصه عمده رضاخان قلدری بود، ایجاد وحشت در دل مردم بود که رمز موفقیتش بود.
In 1931, Reza Shah sent his 11-year-old son to be educated in the West, at Le Rosé school on Lake Geneva in Switzerland. Reza Shah said, "It is hard for me to part from my beloved son, but Iran needs educated and enlightened rulers." But the beloved son was to suffer more than the father.
He was sent to a foreign country with a guardian who was intimidated by Reza Shah into making sure that this boy never got into any trouble, so that the boy was never allowed to do anything. He couldn't ride a bicycle, he wasn't allowed to go off weekends climbing in the mountains in Switzerland, and so he was basically marooned in his room. He had an utterly miserable time. He was a lonely, miserable, isolated young man.
On his return to Iran in 1936, the 17-year-old Crown Prince was ordered to marry Princess Fawzia, the sister of King Farouk of Egypt. The royal wedding took place in Tehran in March 1939. Among the guests at the celebrations were military attachés from European countries on the brink of war. Reza Shah had intended to keep Iran out of the war, confident that his army would deter any aggressor. But the British and Russians needed to run a supply route through Iran, and so, on the 25th of August 1941, they invaded from the north and south. There was virtually no resistance.
The swift action that occupied a weak country in danger of falling into the grip of Hitler.
Expecting to be dethroned, Reza Shah abdicated in favor of his son. He went into exile in South Africa, where he died in 1944. His last message to his son was, "Never be afraid of anything." With no guarantee that the Allies would approve his succession, the Crown Prince had to move quickly. On the 16th of September 1940,